There's head off. Wonderful. So I'm so happy to be here with y'all today for our fifth episode in our Watch 2.0 series. This episode is Reproductive Life with HIV, Action Steps from Pregnancy Planning to Infant Feeding. I am so excited to be here with the presenters here today. We will learn a little bit more about them as we move forward in the presentation. Next slide. Thank you. About the Well Project. So we are a nonprofit organization whose mission is to change the course of the HIV/AIDS pandemic through a unique and comprehensive focus on women and girls across the gender spectrum. You can access resources and join our community at www.thewellproject.org. These slides will be available afterwards for any clickable links. Next slide. About Watch 2.0. This is our treatment advocacy webinar series based on our 2015 series. There are 7 monthly sessions and we are over halfway complete. We are in episode number 5. Capacity building, training for women living with HIV. There have been various topics that we have talked about over the past 5 episodes, and I'm so excited to be a part of this one, which is supported by our Views Positive Action grants. Next slide. I wanted to make this note, and Ieshia, if you did want to add afterwards, we thought that it was really important that we shed light on our note on gender and language. We are proud to be a resource that welcomes and focuses on women across the gender spectrum. That means all women who identify as such, as well as all people who can benefit from our materials and support networks. We not only acknowledge and affirm, but celebrate the existence of our community members of trans and non-binary experience. The language we use on our website and in our programs reflects this affirmation, and our commitment is to grow stronger in this practice and more inclusive in our language. Do either Ieshia or Heather have anything to add as we have this conversation today?
Thank you for that, Ciarra. I don't have anything to add. I think you summed it up really good, and I'm very proud of, even having this slide and even challenging and acknowledging what's going on in society right now and coming down from the federal landscape.
Okay, we can go to the next slide then. Thank you. All right, so on our agenda today, this conversation is going to get good. It's going to get deep. I hope I don't get too emotional because this is one of my most favorite topics. But in this agenda today, we'll be talking our welcome, getting pregnant, pregnancy, birth options, infant feeding decision making, postpartum support. We'll have a Q&A at the end and then a closing. So that's it. Next slide. Oh yeah, I couldn't wait to introduce y'all. I couldn't wait for this slide. So as y'all know, I am Ciarra CC Covin. I'm Senior Manager of Community Programming here at the Well Project. I will just let Heather introduce herself and then Ieshia, you can do the same.
Hey y'all, my name is Heather O'Connor. I use she, they pronouns. I'm so thankful to be a community advisory board member for the Well Project. The Well Project is the first organization that I found after being diagnosed with HIV in 2016, and it's given me a community and a family that I love and feel very, very held by. I also am so happy to be the program coordinator for the Reunion Project. I also do communications for them. They are the Alliance of Long-Term Survivors of HIV. And we host community convenings around the US for long-term survivors and lifetime survivors of HIV. There's a really inclusive definition for long-term survivors, including allies. Basically, if you are a person living with HIV, if you love a person living with HIV, if you care about the rights for people living with HIV and their quality of life, you are welcome in this space to share it with us. I also am so happy to be working for the National Working Positive Coalition, doing administrative work in their communications work, focusing on employment benefits for people living with HIV. So incredibly important to advocate for employment benefits, especially with the state of the administration right now, and things being in flux. It's important to be loud and to continue to reiterate that people living with HIV deserve a wonderful quality of life, and we all have our own identities outside of our diagnosis, and so yeah, I hopefully I can send the websites for both of those to you all if you are interested in checking them out, or you can just reach out to me. And I'm so happy to be here with you all and to share this space with Cece and Ieshia. I love both of them so much. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Heather. I love you too, my girl. But I'm Ieshia Scott. I'm representing the Dandelions movement, and you can visit us at www.thedandelionsmovement.org. And the work that we do centers and uplifts persons born with or acquired HIV in adolescence. And that's me, myself. I love working with the Dandelions movement because it gives me the opportunity to do something for my community and be able to make sure that we're at the table and we're centered in discussions. And I'm also the finance and operations manager at Positive Women's Network and a previous CAB member of the Well Project.
Oh, I'm so excited. I need to find another word, but I am. Then we could just go ahead and jump right on into this next slide. Oh, so pregnancy and HIV. Not really sure how y'all want to move forward. Anybody want to jump in, but I know there are a lot of misconceptions out there that women living with HIV cannot have babies. I mean, we're on this call for a reason. Y'all, we're having babies. Like, we're doing it. We're having sex, and then we're also having babies. This has been true all through the HIV pandemic. And now, you know, the women are living longer. Babies are being born without HIV. Did you ever think, like, for either of you, I'm opening that question up. Did you ever think that you could have a baby who is not living with HIV?
I did. And I'm gonna go real quick. I did simply because my brothers were born negative, and I was the first child my mother had. I was born positive. So I knew it was absolutely it you could do it. Like I knew it was absolutely possible that persons can be born positive and folks after them could be born negative, and even also going to camps where siblings could attend and meeting other folks that were born positive. And maybe at the time I didn't know that we were positive, but once I got older and understood the dynamics of these camps or certain spaces I was in, you recognize that a lot of us firstborns were positive and then our younger siblings were negative. So because of that, I knew.
That's deep. What about you, Heather?
Yeah, so I come from like a very, I grew up going to like Catholic school. I had like a religion class that I had to go to. And I remember there was like one chapter that was on like sexual health. And I think HIV like showed up like once real briefly. But aside from that, like when I was even diagnosed, I had very little education about HIV and the demographic that is affected by HIV. And there's just so much misinformation, and it's just not, we don't talk about sex enough. So my first question after I was diagnosed was like, how long do I have to live? And then my second one was, can I ever be a mom? Um, I I grew up with a lot of trauma in the household, and so I wanted really deeply to be able to have the opportunity to experience raising children in like a loving and inclusive environment. And it's something that I just like always envisioned myself doing. So now that I have the experience of like being a person living with HIV who birthed two children, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old now. I talk about it all the time. I make sure I'm having conversations about that, because the first thing that people think and even say sometimes when they learn that I'm a person living with HIV is like, oh, your kid's got it too then. Right. And that's just like this huge misconception and an opportunity to be able to like educate and have an open conversation about ways that people living with HIV can be on treatment if it's accessible to them. That's not accessible to a lot of people right now because of the current administration. But if it is accessible to them and they do have the care to be able to stay virally suppressed during pregnancy and then deliver, give life to babies, we can give birth to babies who are not living with HIV, and so much more. So yeah, it's totally able to happen, and I try to be as loud as I possibly can about that.
Thank y'all. Next slide. Because it definitely is going off of what you were just saying. Like, so I don't know how to pronounce these medicine names. I know y'all better than me. But like back in the 90s, we had this research that showed that zidovudine, how you
Zidopine, I think.
say
It's AZT. Yeah.
I didn't even know that. So AZT for people, for pregnant people living with HIV, that it reduced the chance of transmitting HIV to their babies. Back then, I know when I met kids that were, well, we were adults at that point, but people that were born with HIV, they had y'all were going by a different name at that time. And I think that's where this was coming from, known as perinatal or vertical transmission, which was their mother to child transmission language. And it's all stigmatizing. And I just thought that that was such a important point. I love to hear lifetime survivors, and I love to hear dandelions, like to be able to, as a community, to be able to change, the language that is being used to describe you, that established, back in the 90s. I think that's huge. Now the standard practice is to test pregnant people for HIV, to provide HIV treatment to pregnant people living with HIV, and to give HIV drugs to babies of people living with HIV. Um, that wasn't always going on, and I just can't imagine if we did have access or knew, even earlier on, how many babies could potentially not been born with HIV. But so grateful that we are where we are now, because we have all of these great advancements. Y'all are more than welcome to jump in and take over.
Yeah. No, I don't, yeah, I didn't want these like slides. Thank you for bringing that up, Cece. But yeah, so I want to bring up the fact that like so many birthing parents find out that they're living with HIV when they become pregnant and go to the doctor and get these tests. And so like here it is, a huge life event, like you're going to give birth to a child, and then also on top of that you find out that you are living with HIV. And on you know, with just like all of that weighing on someone while trying to like grow life in their body, a lot of the times providers aren't necessarily educated about what comes next, or in a position to be able to like deliver that news to someone in a way that that person feels held and supported. But yeah, so with HIV treatment and an undetectable viral load, the likelihood of transmitting HIV to a baby during pregnancy, birth, and breast or chest feeding can be less than 1 in 1%. And I was lucky enough to be able to be in a position where I had a provider who just openly asked me when I found out I was pregnant, how I would like to feed my baby. And that's just like, that's not the case for most people. And my response to that was immediately like, no, I'm going to give my baby formula. I know what I'm supposed to do. Because I feel, in my experience, I felt as though I had to do the quote unquote right thing because I found myself in a position where I was living with HIV, and I was automatically treated differently than someone who were to go to the doctors to find out for the first time that they are pregnant, and they are not a person living with HIV. And so I, through community and through just growth, like within myself and like working on my self-love, I've realized like I am not my diagnosis. You know, my diagnosis is something that has given me the gift to be able to educate others and to uplift other people and remind them like you are worthy, and you have the right to all of the different resources that are available for you to stay healthy and to have a great pregnancy, be supported, and also support your child. But Cece, thank you for taking the lead on the slides, girl. I know that you were wanting to sit down. But thank you. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Ieshia, but feel free.
For me, I just want to say the good news in progress for me just shows what happens when researchers, you know, really take up space for different communities, because then they're able to have the standard practice that we have now so that babies are not born positive. And I think it reinforces why organizations like the Dandelions movement exist today, because we know that when research happens, and when specific communities are included in that research, then there can be updates to a standard in practice, even if it's just how we take care of ourselves and things that we can do to live a longer and healthier life. So I love this, seeing, the change from the 1990s to now, even in how we take up ownership and how folks describe us, our existence or our transmission at a point was just reduced to, how we acquire that virus, vertical, you come out vertically and those types of things. So it's seeing this shows, what happens over time when folks are intentional about specific communities and learning about those communities and how to impact those communities in specific ways.
I think we're good for the next slide. I think it's also so important to mention the fact that unplanned pregnancies are common in general and among women living with HIV or birthing parents living with HIV. Pregnancy and family planning does not happen the same way. I think that society paints this picture of this like you find a partner, you get married, you have a child, you raise the child, and like that's all, that's, if that's what you would like to do, if that's your path, that's wonderful. But there are so many different situations, and there are no reasons to stigmatize anyone for the way that their life path pans out. So if you find that you are pregnant, you can discuss your plans with an HIV care provider. If you don't feel supported and you don't feel uplifted by that provider, you find yourself a new one, you come to us and we'll help you find a new one who will support you and uplift you, because you deserve that respect. Find an obstetrician or midwife familiar with HIV. Yeah, so often I found in my care, not just with like prenatal and postpartum care, that I've had to educate my provider about HIV and about the care that I need. And you can also ask your HIV provider and OB or midwife to talk to each other and coordinate care before and during pregnancy. The coordination of care is so incredibly important. So we're talking like mental health services. Those providers should be talking to your OB providers, your primary care physician, your infectious disease doctor. They should all be on board and know what is going on with you. There may be medications that you're on for mental health that are not conducive to your pregnancy or to your HIV medications. And I'm just going to continue to advocate for a more consistent communication between all providers for every person living with HIV. Put together your support network. The Well Project has a program called BIBA. We have a Facebook group of mothers and birthing parents living with HIV with an interest in breast and chest feeding. There are places for you to feel held and supported, and you can receive caring and non-judgmental and caring and non-judgmental environment around people who know about HIV and pregnancy. Is your partner supportive? Your providers, counselors, and other women and birthing parents living with HIV, considering pregnancy, or who've had children. Yeah, so it's also like a time to really self-reflect and determine like what your needs are. Pregnancy is extremely hard. Life is extremely hard, but when you are growing another life inside of you, it's important to make sure that you have avenues to be able to just like kiki and like, talk to others about how you're feeling. Suicidal ideation is a real thing that can come up with pregnancy, and it did for me. And so reach out to people that care for you and will have your back, and do research with you to make sure that you are able to be provided with all of the resources you need to be in a good place. And to deal with the ebbs and flows that come along with growing a human being inside your body. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I'm going to add, as a person living with HIV, when you become pregnant, you're immediately, informed that you need to see a high-risk provider. So for many, that's going to lessen your options of knowledgeable providers that are understanding and considerate of your lived experience. And I think the most important thing a pregnant person can do for themselves is be educated, be knowledgeable, surround yourselves with people who are also knowledgeable on birthing and before you get pregnant, and family planning, and even potentially, if you don't have the availability of getting a OB in your area that may be familiar with HIV, that you have the opportunity to maybe speak to people who have that opportunity and availability to do so. The most important thing also for you to remember, and this isn't just for anybody who is a birthing person, but any person that is seeing a medical provider in general, that they work for you, and they are paid quite handsomely most times by your insurance to do that job for you. So what that means for me is that, I always have a say, and I'm not afraid to, fire a provider. but I'm also in an area where I can have the pick and I can afford to move around. But I want to acknowledge that, folks may not have that availability. I know when I was in Orlando, Florida, and pregnant with my child, there were not many high-risk clinics that I could choose from. There are about two, and both of them were staffed with individuals that were not as familiar. And I had to lean a lot into the resources that I had, the knowledge that I knew, the education that had been provided to me for 20 plus years from my pediatric doctor, Dr. Anna Puga. So, I just wanted to just take that moment to just acknowledge some of the things that you can do for yourself, even if you don't necessarily have that support around you or have that availability to, move around and find that support. And also, even with your family and friends, there's online groups for birthing persons or just people to connect with others living with HIV, where you can get into these support groups virtual support groups online if you don't have the availability to do it locally in your area. And we can
Yeah.
go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just we could still go to the next slide. I think during my when I was pregnant with Zuri, that was one thing that I needed. It was that community. I knew that I needed to go into this doctor when it was time to deliver, because the people that delivered me wasn't the people that I saw the whole way through the pregnancy. So I knew it was going to be a whole nother team of just other people. So I already had stuff printed off. I had pamphlets. I had whatever they needed. And it's a shame you still got to advocate for yourself in that way in the moment. And we have, different services like, doulas and midwives and all of them that can help, but I ain't had it. All I had was my printed out papers that they was going to listen to, because y'all is not about to just swing me any type of way. And I think sometimes that HIV diagnosis, I know for me, it was like, because I have HIV and I don't know what is HIV, like what does it do? I expect for the doctors to know that, but realize that all the time they have the science part of it. You don't really know what it's like living. No, I really want to experience having a baby, and I really want my birth to look like this, and I still have the right to be able to discern those things. Oh yeah, look at that. Next slide.
Yes, it's so funny because I said that as soon as I see it, I'm like, wait, that's exactly what we were talking about. But I don't think the CC was saying go forward. I think she was acknowledging that what we were speaking on was literally right in line with this slide. And I definitely agree. And I think that it is important to, if you have the availability to have a doula and a trained professional that can be there with you, that you're able to have that. I think that it's also important that if you have insurance when you're pregnant and you're doing your family, or, before you're pregnant and doing your family planning, taking that step to look at your insurance and seeing the benefits that are available. Or even if you know that in the next year or two that you want to be pregnant, to go ahead and look into what insurances that you can change to that may be more beneficial for you during your pregnancy and, after pregnancy as well. And I think it's so important to that final note for, Black birthing people and their babies. We see all the time stories in the news about birthing experience by Black individuals that are having babies and their pain not even being taken serious. So, and on top of that, we've also seen, docuseries and things that are coming out that are explaining the birthing journey of Black individuals. And I think that it's so important that you are aware of, these issues that happen within that landscape and how you can protect yourself, prior to even going in. And understanding that you may show up in a space where individuals may have bias. I remember when I showed up to my first hospital to have my baby, and it was not the space that I was supposed to actually have my baby at, but that's where the ambulance took me. And when I was there, as soon as they found out I was positive, I can see how things changed. I can see how people were, talking to me, or more so talking at me, and how folks were acting, because I was experiencing a lot of heavy bleeding and there was just blood everywhere. So you could also see, I could also see firsthand, that experience of people just being like, slow to emergency. And while I'm stressed out and I'm not knowing what's going on, and I'm knowing my first birthing experience, and I'm knowing, that I was actually uh I experienced the same heavy bleeding that literally had to cause for me to, get blood. I remember passing out on a table and like coming to again, and having that fear. And in that moment, recognizing that I need to get up and get out of here, and telling my child's father that we need to go. I have to go to the hospital. It was meant for me to go. And also trusting that he was going to get me there. So in that moment, I was my best advocate. I was the person that could speak up for myself. And then he was the person that was there to support that voice. And even if he wasn't supportive of that voice, I think I probably would have been ready to drive myself. They probably would have had to put me in handcuffs in that hospital, because to me, I know the importance of receiving medical care that acknowledges my being and understands when I'm speaking, and the fear and the tremble in my voice, that's deep rooted trauma, even trauma that's been passed on to me. So I will stop there.
Yeah, we can move on to the next slide, but I just want to say, uplift that deeply rooted trauma, like generational trauma that lives within you. Like that's such a real thing. And especially like, in a situation like you were in a place where you like weren't feeling safe, right? And you had to advocate for yourself. This is an opportunity for, if you are a provider, if you are a doula, to like acknowledge situations like that and advocate and step in and support women living with HIV, but especially Black birthing parents living with HIV. So that's your role. That's what you can do. And I just want to like call to action like that. We need you. So it's so incredibly important, because there are times when people are not listened to, right, as the patient, and we need those voices of advocacy to make sure that we're getting the care that we need. And I'm so sorry you had to go through that, Ieshia, and you are strong as hell. Thank you for sharing that. I'll just go ahead so we can slide through these slides. Vaginal delivery. It's recommended for someone on combination HIV treatment with a low viral load, 1,000 copies or fewer. There are still providers out there that will tell you that you need a C-section. That's not true. C-section has not been shown to further reduce their already low likelihood of transmitting HIV to their baby. Also, another thing I just want to bring to the table is, as Ieshia had said, living with HIV automatically requires for you to be seen as a high risk patient. And also another thing that has been practiced for people living with HIV is induction. So at 39 weeks, I was induced with both of my children, and particularly with my daughter, she was not ready to be born. And that was a very long labor that was very uncomfortable and very unsafe. She was so low in the birth canal that they could not do a C-section because they would risk slicing my bladder in half. And so the second time around with my son, I did advocate to go to full term, but because of complications in the pregnancy, I was induced. But just know that that's a right that you have. And that, so I believe what I was told is that I had to be induced because they didn't want to take the risk of my viral load all of a sudden not being suppressed in that last week of pregnancy, which made no sense to me at all. So yeah, know your rights and know that you are able to have open conversations and advocate for yourself. And as Ieshia said, you can always fire your provider. So I don't know if you have anything to add, Ieshia.
Yes, I had 2 C-sections because I was told, I needed to. The second one because they couldn't figure out how I was actually cut for the first one under the first layers of skin. So they said I risked splitting. But I just wanted to say, I wanted to acknowledge because Heather was told one thing, and I know I was told that, the reason I could not have a vaginal delivery is because I could risk transmitting to my child as they were passing through the birthing canal. And so I remember when I was talking about my birthing options with my second provider, and it eventually came up, well, wait, we have to pause because we need to see your records. And my children are 10 years apart. So by that time, my records had been purged. I had to reach out to the hospital and they were purged. So that brings me to the thought that if things do happen while you're pregnant, and birthing, when you're birthing, you're at the hospital, get a copy of those records when you leave. There's also things that may happen that you may not even be privy to, because my first pregnancy, I was quite privy to a lot of what happened, and those providers did make sure I understood. But I remember it took for my child's father to tell me, for my second pregnancy, that they were actually having issues and that they were signaling for him, to not get worked up or to not show strain, because during that you know time they were going through it, I was heavily bleeding again. So yeah, it just brings me to that thought that to get medical records, even for your next pregnancy, if you want to get pregnant again in the future, and to just be abreast of what happened during your labor and delivery as well.
I think we're good with next slide.
Yeah, I think so too.
So C-section cervical delivery is not recommended for people living with HIV unless they have an unknown viral load, have a viral load of less than, right? Greater than, greater than. There we go. 1,000 copies, bringing me back to math class. Need a C-section for reasons other than preventing HIV transmission. Done before labor begins and birthing parents' water breaks, which reduces baby's contact with parents' blood. That's sort of like what you were saying, Ieshia, with passing through the birth canal, I guess, and may reduce the risk of transmission in certain cases. And people who have C-sections are more likely to get infections than those who give birth vaginally. Do you want to speak to this, Ieshia? Because you experienced a C-section. I didn't experience that.
Yes, I mean, I don't really necessarily have anything to add as far as infection wise, because I didn't necessarily get an infection, but I did experience that really heavy bleeding both times. I did experience needing blood. I experienced passing out because of blood loss during pregnancy. And of course, I can only imagine some of the things that other people have experienced, during C-section or even vaginal birth, being positive or not. I think the most important thing is for this slide is knowing this information. And if you have a provider that is still, using this information to, one, understand that you have a provider that maybe potentially isn't keeping up and updating themselves about birthing and HIV, which is cause for pause, especially if this person sees other positive individuals. So I think, again, the most important thing is just knowing the information so that you're equipped to advocate for yourself. And knowing that you're not needed, you don't have to have a C-section, because number one, it just prolongs too your healing process. And yeah, so I think that's the key thing that can also be taken from these 2 slides. And if nobody else has anything to
I
add.
add something now. I got something to add because I never had a C-section either. I had both vaginal deliveries, but I needed this before I had them kids because I was in there begging. With Zuri, I begged them for a C-section. It was like 26 weeks. I was like, she all right, right? She got I was so tired of being pregnant. Like that, being pregnant is no joke. And then HIV wasn't really a consideration for me. It was all of those other things that could have happened while I was pregnant. Take her out of here. Like, but now that I see this, I probably wouldn't have been so hyped. All right,
I
next one.
love that you said HIV didn't have anything, to do with it, because it does it. What you're talking about is exhaustion. It, especially as a birthing person, you're even more exhausted. You're carrying extra weight, another person, you're eating for them. You're barely fueling yourself. They're
Get her
kicking
out
you.
of
They're not
here.
even appreciative. They're in there kicking you. So, so yeah, no, I get it. That's just exhaustion. We can't go to the next slide though. I just wanted to point that out. That I don't even. I love that you said it has nothing to do with HIV, because it really does. It all birthing persons, we are experiencing the exhaustion of just being pregnant, and also what it takes to continue to show up being pregnant, because a lot of people don't have the luxury of being able to sit during pregnancy. That's a luxury not afforded to many, and many are on their feet, in working. And I honestly don't think that a woman really should be, or a birthing person should be working past like 18 weeks. I think like once the belly's showing
Agreed.
and feet is a little a little heavy, I feel like you really should be afforded opportunities to sit.
Yeah.
And then here we are about postpartum support. And it's saying here that weeks and months after babies arrives involve massive transition challenge and healing, too little support. And, parents struggle and need support around staying connected to healthcare, accessing pediatric care for baby, mental health care, peer and community connections, breast and chest feeding safely and successfully. And honestly, I think with that, it goes into so many different things. And within each of those, we can start having a topic around why that support is necessary, why it's so beneficial for a mother to have that. We know many mothers go home with the baby and they don't have anyone that's going to be there to help them care for the child at night, to help them through the day. And all of this goes back to mental health care and how you even feel about yourself and how you can show up for yourself. Many of us pivot into baby only. So you don't even have the opportunity to care for yourself. So me showing up to my HIV doctor for what right now? At this point, I only have the strength to see about my baby. And at this point, my baby is the most important thing for me, because guess what? As a positive person, I think the greatest gift that I could give to my child is not being positive. I always remember this peer telling me when I had my first child, she said, well, do you like having HIV? She would say, you don't even want to take your medicine right now today. She was like, so why not take it for these next 4 months so your baby never has to take it? So your baby doesn't have to worry about if they do or don't take medicine, will they live? If they do or don't show up to this doctor's appointment, So for me, it was like, hey, I can exchange 3 to 4 months of taking my medicine to make sure that you don't have to have that worry. And so just really getting back to the point is just that support is so necessary. And I am so happy for women that do have the support. They are knowledgeable. They are in areas where they have to pick to go here or there, that they're in the space where they have access to mental health and resources and support group and communities and folks that are going to show up for them at their bedside and at their home with food or cleaning or holding the baby or having a person having a WIC center that is knowledgeable on chest feeding and breastfeeding and that won't threaten to call the authorities on you and have your baby picked up if you decide to breastfeed, to have, pediatric providers that are also knowledgeable in people living with HIV and children that are born to people living with HIV, and also, assisting them and guiding them through that care. I think it's so important. And I know I'm going to pass it to Heather because I know Heather definitely has some points to add around this. But for me, those are all, those key takeaways around postpartum support and what is necessary for a woman to be able, or a birthing person to be able to show up for themselves outside of their baby. And when they're not able to, people that can also show up for them. But yeah, I'm going to end it there and let Heather, because I know you have stuff to add.
No, yeah, I want to elevate and reiterate everything that you said 1,000 times. Again, just bringing it back to the fact that like society has this idea that a birthing person just has this innate ability to be able to parent and like hold everything by themselves. And like, no, like I just either was cut open and a human being was taken out of my body, or like I pushed a human being out of my body, right? We're physically healing and hurting, and then navigating like breast and chest feeding, especially as like a person living with HIV. I'm so thankful that for my breast feeding journey with both of my children, but I didn't know that I was going to advocate to breastfeed when I went to the hospital initially because of stigma, because people are uneducated and don't know that it's a possibility for a birthing person living with HIV to breast and chest feed. And so on top of like my body having to deliver a human being, I also have to advocate and educate you, right? And tell you that I'm more than allowed to do this. Like it is my right, and it is, there are benefits for me and there are benefits for my child. I received no lactation support at all. I went home with a breast pump that I had to rent with my own money, that I was fortunate enough to be able to afford from the hospital. And I turned it up real high because I thought, like, muscle through it. If I turn it up higher, I'm going to get more milk. Don't do that. That's not what you do. Ended up with an infection on both my nipples, reached out to a breastfeeding, chest feeding support group on the phone, and I was crying with my baby who was hungry. And I was told that because I disclosed my HIV status, that they were told that they were to call CPS on anyone that discloses that. And so on top of all of this and advocating for myself and my child, I was then told that my child was going to potentially be taken away from me. And so that was taking away all agency that I had as a birthing person because of my status and because of misinformation and lack of education from people who were supposed to be able to advocate and help me. And I'm navigating all this as a privileged white woman. And I want to be very clear about the fact that my journey probably wouldn't look like it did, the high points of my journey, if I were a Black woman trying to navigate that in the South. And so it's my responsibility to be able to use that platform and that privilege to advocate for my Black sisters and make sure that everyone knows that we all deserve healthcare that is conducive to our needs, and that it's not it. Yes, we are our own best advocate, and I fully believe that, and like, do love yourself and do advocate for yourself, but we should be able to sit the hell down sometimes and have someone else advocate for us. And so that's community too. Show up for those who need it, and know that if you ask someone if they're doing okay after they give birth and they've got this look behind their eyes and they're not really there, like, ask again and be like, hey, how are you doing? Right?
You probably just assume that they're not okay anyways. It has
Yes.
been 3.5 years for me, and I feel like I literally just came out of postpartum depression, like in front
Yes.
of of my community. Okay, I know we're running out of time. We still have a
Oh,
few
yes.
slides left. Sorry to have to jump in this way. Just want to make sure that everyone saw the link in the chat for our postpartum needs assessment survey. That's that bit.ly postpartum HIV. There we have about 4 or 5 more slides that we're just going to breeze through. The slides will be available on our website after this episode. Those that attended today will receive a follow-up email with the link to the page and the slides. Those that complete our 7-part series will be receiving the certificates for the Watch series. Watch 2.0 series at the end. And this has been such a robust conversation that probably could last like days, like not even just a call, but days. And I want to make sure that we get that evaluation link in the chat as well. We would appreciate it if you would take a moment after today's episode. Let us know, how we did. Did you learn anything? What was the value of that? Those types of things. Heather, you have already started talking about the breast and chest feeding, and the importance and how some of us are offered different options than others. And like I said, these slides will be available afterwards. I don't know. We could be very ambitious and try to take like 2 questions, in our last six minutes.
Yeah, I'm
With
cool with that.
all.
Yes. Okay. I love the balloons
Um,
celebration.
And Olivia, it would be so helpful if you could just go to our last slide so that we have our information there. Yes, our learn more slide. So that you have all of the ways to connect with the Well Project to get more resources and information on sexual and reproductive health for women living with HIV. And I would like to open the floor to any questions. Please drop them in the chat. Oh, I see one. Thank you, Jonathan. So
Oh,
is male living with HIV, how can fathers help the mother and the child during childbirth?
don't fall asleep while the mother or birthing parent is delivering. Number one, speaking from experience, right? Like, I shouldn't have to wake you up to watch your child be born. Um, just be there, breathe with us, hold our hand, ask us what we need, get us some ice, like, check in. What are you feeling right now? Can I hold the baby so you can sit and stare at a wall? Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't, Ieshia, you have anything? I have strong feelings about that, obviously.
I think some of the most important things for me when I had my children was the little things. I didn't necessarily, well, I'll say what I needed more of, like, the sending of the food, coming over to clean up. I honestly just wanted to enjoy being a mom and holding my baby and smelling milk under their neck.
Yes.
So, so to be honest, those ways of folks showing up on the sidelines, even, showing up and helping me with my first child, picking her up, doing those day-to-day things, so that I didn't have to do it. I remember, returning to work at week 2. I was up and back at it. I I really honestly probably would and should have taken the time to be off if I really understood the importance of really caring for yourself as well. I think it's also important to just talk to women about and birthing persons about what it means to be pregnant outside of just what we think, because a lot of people, especially if you've never experienced pregnancy before, you're already at the time where you're holding the baby, loving the baby, dressing the baby. So those are all the fun parts, but the reality of it is that birth is very hard. You may not walk away from birth with a baby. A baby may go home without a parent. So many things to consider when having a baby, but people showing up for you in other ways so you can just enjoy or just rest, or even being available for you to sleep, is just so important.
I also saw in the chat that Krista mentioned being an advocate for the birthing person via having conversations with providers, right? So knowing that information, becoming educated as far as like the kind of care that that person needs to be able to advocate in real time as that person is in labor and delivering. I saw Kim just said something. How do we
And that was
relax?
Jonathan's question we were answering, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Jonathan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that what you just saying that Heather, so that support starts before labor and delivery even
Yeah.
begins. So like that education, that's going to appointments ahead of time, that support, like I just learning as much as possible, holding hands, like not literally, but being beside them as much as possible. I think it feels good to know that you're not alone. And I didn't know, Heather, you were going to the next question from Kim. How do y'all relax while being a mom? My first answer is inappropriate, so I'm gonna let y'all go.
No, girl, I smoke weed and I enjoyed THC, and we just had a wonderful workshop at the last THC community convening about cannabis as alternative healthcare. Very informative, right? Should be covered by insurance, but that's a whole nother webinar. But part of relaxing when I was a mom, like I couldn't even sit down and watch TV because I couldn't remember what I liked. I'm like, I don't know what I want to watch. Like, I don't remember what kind of music I like to listen to. So I think like part of that is rediscovering who you are and like the things about you that make you unique so that you can enjoy things and like learn to really relax. What about you, Ieshia? We hang with each other. We love our girls, right?
Honestly, I'm gonna say I think right now that that is what I'm learning to do. I'm actually learning how to rest as a mom. I'm really on this journey right now as of finding myself outside of all of my titles. You know, my first child I had really young, so I've pretty much always been a mom. A big part of my identity and who I am is a mom. So a big part of my identity needs to become rest. It needs to become bedside Baptist. Okay. So I am learning that. And I saw that Krista said, you know, how would you should, but there was a question for a doula birth worker who is taking on a pregnant person with HIV as a client for the first time. How would you suggest they go about educating themselves on HIV outside of listening to the birthing person? I think showing up in spaces like this, you know, the Well Project also have so many fact sheets where you can learn from some of those facts there, even from different blogs and things like that. There's some blogs also on the Rail Project and on other sites that center people living with HIV that get into folks' experience with birthing and those things. But I think, of course, I feel like, you know, that the most important thing is to listen to the person that is having the baby, that is sharing their experiences, because all of our journeys are going to be different. You know, you hear today how different Heather and I's journey is, but I think showing up in sessions like this, especially no matter what type of provider you are, if you're dealing with or your work intersects with people living with HIV and people that are having that are birthing children and living with HIV, I think that it's so important to show up in these spaces like this that maybe aren't that don't involve a continued education credit, but gives you the access and the knowledge through people and their lived experience, showing up and sharing. Also, like I said, going to sites that have those resources and fact sheets and those things where you can equip yourself with knowledge to, you know, better help the individuals, and also just staying up to date with some of the national organizations that are putting out information and things around, you know, what we can do as birthing persons and people living with HIV, especially if you're, you know, that's your work. I think it's so important that you be connected to know that there has been changes in guidelines for birthing persons to be able to chest and breastfeed and vaginal delivery. I think the biggest thing as a provider, again, in any section, I think, you know, it really is a disservice if the person that's paying you have to tell you how to do your job. So I think equipping yourself with some knowledge is the best way, and coming up in informal settings or formal is also good too.
That feels like a big mic drop. Mic drop. Guys, be told how to do your job. Nah, but I did see some comments that say that this conversation has really opened some folks' eyes and makes them want to do better. So thank you, Heather and Ieshia, for joining us today. I know we're a little bit over time. Thank you for everyone for staying at the beginning and staying at the end as we work this thing out. We so gratefully appreciate y'all, and have a good day.
Thank you. Love y'all. Thanks so much for sharing space with me today.